My name is Grace, and I never thought I would be writing about this experience. It began with a seemingly ordinary day, but everything abruptly changed. Before I knew it, I discovered myself in a realm that transcended all logic and reason. It was there that I met Jesus, and in that moment, I was confronted with truths I had never expected to witness. He showed me things I could not keep to myself, things that were both profound and terrifying. One of the most chilling revelations was about the mark of the beast. It will be implemented, and the reality of it was far more terrifying than I had ever imagined. I now believe it is my duty to share this with you, to warn and awaken those who are unaware of what is to come. That morning had started just like any other, or at least that was what I thought. I woke up, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window. The sun was shining, and everything appeared normal, yet deep inside, I had an unshakable sense of unease. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that it was nothing. Life had been stressful lately. Work, bills, and the never-ending rush of daily responsibilities. As I stood up to wash my cup, an unexpected wave of dizziness overtook me. My vision blurred, and my heart pounded as though it were trying to escape my chest. Before I could steady myself, my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, as panic surged through me. But then suddenly, everything went silent. For a few brief moments, I no longer felt my body. The pain, the worries, the noise of life, they all faded into nothingness. I looked around and saw my own lifeless form lying on the ground. The experience was beyond my imagination. From above, I watched myself, desperately trying to call out for help, but no words came. Then a brilliant light filled the room, but it wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm, inviting, and full of peace. I felt drawn to it, and before I even realized it, I was moving toward it. The next thing I knew, I was standing in an endless, boundless space, one filled with an indescribable sense of tranquility. A deep, overwhelming love surrounded me, washing away all fear. It was as if I had stepped into a realm more real than anything I had ever known. This was not a dream. This was something beyond life itself. I don't know how long I stood there before I noticed a figure approaching. At first, I couldn't make out his features, but as he came closer, I recognized him. It was Jesus. My heart knew him before my eyes fully grasped the vision before me. He radiated kindness and love, and in his presence, I felt safer than I had ever felt before. He did not speak immediately, but I understood that he was there for me. That was when everything began to unfold before my eyes. In that moment, I realized that my life, as I had known it, would never be the same again. The instant I stepped into the light, I felt weightless, as if every burden that had once tethered me to the physical world had been lifted. No pain, no stress, just an overwhelming sense of peace. The colors around me were unlike anything I had ever seen, vivid, radiant, alive, and for the first time in my existence, I truly understood what it meant to be free. As I moved forward, I became aware of a presence beside me. It was not frightening, but rather comforting, familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Despite my initial lack of clarity, I was certain that I was not alone. Then I heard a voice, gentle yet powerful, say, "You are safe." And in that instant, all fear disappeared. I felt as though I was being embraced, not physically, but in a way that reached deep into my very soul. I noticed a path ahead, glowing with light. It seemed like an invitation, one I could not refuse. Without hesitation, I stepped forward, each step unlocking memories, realizations, and truths that I had never seen before. My entire earthly life flashed before me. Every decision I had made, every doubt I had wrestled with, and every moment of love I had experienced. It was all laid bare before my eyes, yet there was no judgment, only understanding. As I reached the end of the path, the light became even brighter, illuminating everything around me. Then I saw him. A figure stood before me, waiting with a presence so radiant and full of love that I felt my very soul tremble. It was Jesus. His eyes held an infinite depth, love, wisdom, and understanding beyond anything I had ever known. At that moment, I was certain that I was in the right place. Jesus extended his hand toward me, and as I reached for it, an overwhelming sense of peace washed over me. "Come," he said, and without hesitation, I followed him into the unknown. Standing in his presence was unlike anything I could have imagined. His very essence radiated a love so deep and pure that it embraced every part of me. It was not just something I felt, it was something I became immersed in, as though his love was a living force that surrounded and filled me. For a moment he said nothing, but he didn't need to. His eyes told me everything. I was loved. I was safe. I was home. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, yet carried an undeniable authority. "Grace," he said, "you must see something." A strange mix of emotions stirred within me. Excitement, because I knew I was about to witness something profound, and fear, because I sensed that whatever I was about to see would change my life forever. Jesus led me into what seemed like a vast, endless space, and suddenly, images appeared before me. At first, I saw the world as I knew it, familiar cities, daily life unfolding in real time. But then I realized there was something different. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing me to see beyond the physical world into the spiritual realm. I saw forces at work, both good and evil, waging a battle for humanity. Jesus turned to me and said, "The world is changing faster than they realize. Many are unaware of what is happening." His words penetrated me with a sharp edge. In that moment, I understood just how many people were caught up in distractions, oblivious to the greater reality unfolding around them. Then he placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Grace, what you see next is crucial. You must share it with the entire world." The vision that followed was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. As scenes unfolded before my eyes, I saw a world that looked familiar, yet something was undeniably different. People were going about their daily lives, unaware of what was happening behind the scenes. Technology was advancing at an unprecedented rate, weaving itself into every aspect of human life. The world was more interconnected than ever before. At first, the changes seemed subtle. People were introduced to digital identification, cashless transactions, and personal tracking systems. These innovations were welcomed with excitement, seen as convenient and necessary. But beneath the surface, I saw something far more sinister at play. Governments and powerful organizations were gradually conditioning people, making them increasingly dependent on these systems. The transition was slow but deliberate. At first, those who resisted were ignored, then ridiculed, and eventually excluded from society. Jesus looked at me and said, "This is how it begins, Grace. Many will not see it until it is too late." As I stood beside him, the vision before me became even clearer. I saw long lines of people willingly accepting something that was presented as a simple solution, a new technology designed to offer security, health monitoring, and financial stability. Then I saw it. A small, nearly invisible mark appeared on their hands and foreheads. It was promoted as an advanced breakthrough. No more need for cash, cards, or traditional identification. With just a single scan, people could access everything they needed. But I knew the truth. What seemed like convenience was something far more dangerous than they realized. At first, it all seemed harmless. People smiled, relieved by the newfound ease and security. Theft, fraud, and identity loss were no longer concerns, and society embraced the change without hesitation. But as I continued watching, I saw the truth hidden beneath the surface. This was far more than just a technological advancement. It was absolute control. Once individuals accepted the system, they unknowingly surrendered their freedom. Every action, every movement, and every decision was monitored, tracked, and subtly influenced. Without realizing it, people no longer made their own choices. Slowly, their autonomy eroded, but because it happened so gradually, they didn't even notice. This is the mark of the beast, I kept thinking, my heart sinking with the weight of realization. The warnings from the Bible echoed in my mind. I had read about this moment, and now it was unfolding right before my eyes. They had been deceived. They thought it was just technology, just another step toward convenience. But in truth, it was a spiritual trap, a calculated effort by the enemy to enslave souls. Then I noticed a group of people who refused to accept the mark. Unlike the rest of society, they saw the truth. They resisted. But their defiance came at a cost. They were cast out, forced to live on the fringes of civilization, unable to buy food, unable to travel, unable to receive medical care. They became outcasts, treated as extremists. I watched as families were torn apart. Some gave in to the pressure, unable to endure the hardships, while others stood firm in their faith. Tears streamed down my face as I witnessed how easily people fell into deception. Jesus looked at me, his eyes, full of both love and sorrow, pierced through my soul. "Warn them, Grace," he said. "Tell them the truth before it's too late." I nodded, understanding that this vision was not just for me. It was a message for the entire world. The vision continued, and I saw how the mark was introduced, not through force, but through persuasion. It began subtly, with clever marketing and careful manipulation. Governments and corporations worked together to present it as the next step in human evolution. They played on people's fears, fear of economic collapse, fear of insecurity. I saw advertisements everywhere, promoting the mark as a tool for a better future. Celebrities endorsed it, religious leaders justified it, and the media praised its benefits. Society gradually came to accept it, to the point where it became nearly impossible to function without it. Jobs required it. Stores refused service without it. Schools mandated it for students. Jesus showed me how deception worked on multiple levels. Some people accepted the mark simply because they were unaware of its true nature. Others understood what it meant, but felt powerless to resist. I saw families arguing, friendships breaking apart, and communities dividing over the decision. Observing people who once had faith in God abandon it for the sake of comfort and convenience was the most heartbreaking sight. I wanted to scream. I wanted to warn them. But I was only an observer in this vision, unable to change what was happening. Jesus' voice cut through my despair, steady and filled with reassurance. They need to understand that I'm their true source, he said. Then he showed me a small group of believers who refused to conform. They gathered in secret, encouraging one another, holding on to their faith. Though they were cast out, they believed that God would provide for them. They suffered, persecuted across the world, yet they remained steadfast, clinging to the hope of what was to come. What I saw next shocked me. Technology was not just a part of the system. It was the driving force behind it. This wasn't just about microchips or tattoos. It was an entire infrastructure of surveillance, influence, and control. Artificial intelligence operated at the core, making decisions for humanity while people blindly followed. I saw homes equipped with smart technology, tracking every movement and recording every conversation. Digital currency replaced cash, and a social credit system dictated people's lives. Every action was ranked, monitored, and judged. People had given up their freedom, yet they believed they were more advanced than ever. They didn't realize they were prisoners. Obedience to the new rules was now tied to every aspect of one's life. Medical records, finances, and even personal beliefs were all stored in the same interconnected system. Jesus showed me how artificial intelligence, AI, subtly shaped people's thoughts and behaviors. The algorithms knew them better than they knew themselves, predicting their desires and fears. People no longer had control over their own lives. Drones flew silently through the streets, scanning individuals and making instantaneous decisions about who could enter buildings or use services. It was terrifying to witness how quickly people adapted to this new reality, relying more on technology than on their own instincts and judgment. Jesus spoke, his voice calm yet firm. This is not of me. This is designed to separate people from themselves. In my heart, I understood the depth of his words. The system was not just a technological advancement. It was a spiritual attack, crafted to replace God with technology. It sought to make people rely on it for everything rather than trusting in divine provision. Some resisted. They chose to live off-grid, avoiding digital footprints, but the system relentlessly pursued them. No matter where they went, they were tracked. Jesus reassured me, saying that those who put their trust in him would always find a way out. There will always be a way, he added, his smile full of love. The vision that followed pierced my heart with urgency. Tell them, Grace, Jesus urged. Tell them that time is limited. The fear of what would happen if people continued down this deceptive path gripped me. I saw the unfolding of a series of crises, increasing natural disasters, outbreaks of war, and economic collapse. These events served as justifications to escalate the situation. People were convinced that they needed it for their survival. Fear became the tool to enslave them, Jesus warned. Those who accepted the mark would initially feel relief, thinking they were safe, but they would soon realize that something deeper was missing, something that could not be explained. Their relationship with God would fade, and in turn, they would begin to fade as well. Jesus showed me that those who had accepted the mark would feel trapped in a system they could not escape. Yet, he revealed hope as well. Groups of believers who stood firm in their faith, refusing to yield to the pressure of the world. They prayed together, supported one another, and chose faith over fear. My people will never be forgotten, Jesus assured me. He instructed me to tell others to prepare, not just physically, but spiritually. Stay close to him, trust in his provision, and resist the temptation of temporary comfort. The road ahead would not be easy, but he would always be with them. I knew in my heart that this message would change my life forever. It was no longer mine to keep. It was meant to be shared with the world. Jesus then began to reveal the deeper battle taking place behind the scenes. The mark and the technology were merely the visible parts of a much larger spiritual war. This battle had been ongoing for centuries, but now it was becoming more intense. I saw dark forces at work, whispering doubts, fears, and lies into the hearts of humanity. These forces sought to make people believe that God had abandoned them and that the new system was the only way to survive. The enemy's tactics were insidious, using distractions and entertainment to pull people away from the truth. Social media and materialism became powerful tools, diverting attention and keeping people from seeking the deeper truth. The more people immersed themselves in these distractions, the further they drifted from the light. Many people were completely unaware of the spiritual forces at work because they paid so little attention to their spiritual health. Jesus showed me that prayer and faith were the most powerful weapons against the darkness. I witnessed small groups of believers praying fervently, and their prayers acted as shields, protecting them from the enemy. However, many others were trapped in the deception, unable to see the truth of what was really happening. I was shown scenes of churches compromising their values. Some leaders, more focused on worldly success than on spiritual truth, encouraged their followers to accept the mark, claiming it was part of God's plan. It broke my heart to see so many people being led astray. Jesus turned to me and explained, "This is why you must tell them to wake up before it's too late." His words were filled with love and urgency, and I knew that he wanted to prepare his people to stand strong in the coming days. Despite the chaos and the deception surrounding them, Jesus reminded me that there was still hope. He showed me that salvation was still available to those who sought it with an open heart, not through worldly systems. "Believe in me alone. I am the way, the truth, and the life," he said. I could feel the power of his words resonate deeply within me. I witnessed people who had once been lost finding their way back to Jesus. They rejected the world's deception and embraced the truth of his love and grace. They let go of their fears and trusted in his provision, even when that meant facing difficulties. Jesus emphasized the importance of repentance, and he gave me an example of how people who repented sincerely found a new peace and strength. He encouraged me to tell others that no matter how far they had wandered, it was never too late to return to him. I also saw the incredible value of a community of believers standing together in faith. They were far stronger than those who attempted to fight alone. They supported one another, shared resources, and assisted those in need. Jesus reminded me that his church was not a physical building, but a community of people united in love and truth. "Tell them to trust in me, not in the world. I will meet all of their needs," he said. I felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that no matter what happened, those who believed in Jesus would be taken care of. After showing me the world's dark and troubling visions, Jesus gave me a glimpse of what awaited those who remained faithful. Suddenly, I was surrounded by a pure, beautiful light that took my breath away. An overwhelming sense of love and joy filled my heart. I saw a place so magnificent that words could not describe it. The colors were more vibrant than anything I had ever seen, and the air was filled with music that resonated deep within my soul. The atmosphere was filled with peace, complete, utter peace. I saw people rejoicing in their freedom from pain, surrounded by love, their faces glowing with happiness. Jesus looked at me and said, "This is what I have prepared for those who love me." Tears filled my eyes as I realized the incredible beauty of God's promise. No pain, no fear, no struggle, just endless peace in His presence. He showed me how every act of faith, every sacrifice, and every moment of trust in Him would be rewarded beyond anything we could imagine. "Stay strong," He said. "The struggles of this world are temporary, but my promises are eternal." In that moment, I realized that heaven was not just a distant dream. It was a reality waiting for those who chose to follow Him. This realization filled me with hope, and I knew that sharing this vision could help others remain strong through the trials ahead. Jesus then showed me the other side of the choice people would face. For those who accepted the mark, their fate would be heartbreaking. At first, they felt secure and content, believing they had made the right decision. But as time passed, the truth became clear. I saw how their connection to God was severed, leaving them feeling empty and lost. They tried to fill the void with material things, entertainment, and distractions, but nothing could satisfy them. The peace they once knew was replaced by a deep, gnawing sense of regret. People who had accepted the mark could no longer hear God's voice. It was as though an invisible barrier had been placed between them and the truth. They were trapped in a system that controlled every aspect of their lives, with no way out. They were owned, body and soul, by the very powers they had trusted. Jesus showed me families torn apart, children questioning why their parents had made this choice, and others feeling hopeless and abandoned. I saw people crying out in despair, realizing they had been deceived, yet feeling powerless to change their fate. Despite the darkness, Jesus' love remained. He showed me that even in their brokenness, He was still calling out to them, longing for them to turn back. But the longer they stayed in the system, the harder it became to break free. Jesus looked at me with deep sorrow and said, "They must choose wisely, for the consequences are eternal." His words pierced my heart, and I knew that people needed to hear this warning before it was too late. I woke up from my experience with a renewed sense of purpose. I knew I had to share this message and urge people to seek Jesus before it was too late. Just as suddenly as I had crossed over, I felt myself being pulled back. The warmth and peace of heaven faded, and I became aware of the weight of my earthly body again. I gasped for air, my chest heaving as if I had been holding my breath for a long time. The beeping of medical monitors filled my ears, and I saw blurred figures rushing around me. I was back. The transition was jarring. One moment I had been standing beside Jesus, surrounded by indescribable beauty, and the next I was staring at the worried faces of my loved ones. My heart ached, not just from the physical strain, but from the overwhelming emotions of everything I had seen. Tears filled my eyes as I realized the gravity of the message I had been given. The doctors said it was a miracle I survived. I had been unconscious for several minutes. Yet it felt as though I'd spent an eternity with Jesus. My family held my hand, relieved to have me back, but they didn't understand what I had just experienced. How could I explain something so profound? In the following days, I found myself struggling to put the experience into words. Every moment of the vision had been so vivid, so real, yet it felt impossible to convey the urgency of it all. I prayed for guidance, asking Jesus to show me how to share what I had learned. I realized that returning to life wasn't just about survival. It was about purpose. I had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to be a voice of warning and hope. It became clear to me that Jesus wanted me to tell others what I had seen, to prepare them for what was to come. The near-death experience completely changed everything in my life. The things I once worried about, money, career, and social status, no longer seemed important. I had seen the bigger picture, and my heart was now focused on things that truly mattered. I felt an overwhelming urgency to live differently, to prioritize my relationship with Jesus above all else. At first, it was difficult. Friends and family couldn't fully understand what I had been through. Some listened with awe, others with skepticism, and a few dismissed it entirely. But deep in my soul, I knew what I had seen was real, and I couldn't keep it to myself. I began sharing my experience with anyone who would listen. I found myself drawn to prayer groups, online communities, and even strangers who seemed to be searching for answers. Every conversation reminded me that people were hungry for the truth, but were too distracted by the noise of the world to hear it. Living with this new purpose also meant making changes in my daily life. I spent more time in prayer and reading the Bible, seeking guidance for the days ahead. I stopped relying on the world's systems and instead trusted God for my needs. Most importantly, I learned to listen, to really listen, to the Holy Spirit guiding me. Jesus had shown me that the future would be challenging, but he also showed me that his people would never be alone. My mission was now clear: to help others prepare, strengthen their faith, and remind them that no matter what happens, Jesus is the only way. As I adjusted to life after my near-death experience, I quickly realized that the road ahead would not be easy. The world I returned to felt different, not because it had changed, but because I had. Everything I once found comfort in, technology, routine, and security, now felt like distractions from the truth Jesus had shown me. I knew that staying faithful in these challenging times would require unwavering trust in God. Faith was no longer just a concept to me. It was my lifeline. I found myself relying on prayer more than ever before. Each morning, I asked God for strength to continue sharing my testimony, and each night, I thanked him for the courage to face another day. Even with this newfound faith, doubt tried to creep in. I wondered if people would truly listen, or if I was just another voice lost in the noise. Then one day, as I was praying, I felt a deep reassurance in my heart. Jesus' words echoed in my mind: even if one soul listens and turns back to me, it is worth it. That reminder fueled me to keep going. I realized that my journey wasn't about convincing the world. It was about planting seeds of faith in those who were ready to receive it. Difficult times began to test my faith. Financial struggles, personal loss, and the growing tension in the world weighed heavily on me. But through it all, I felt God's presence stronger than ever. He provided in unexpected ways, creating doors I never could have imagined. I learned that faith isn't about having everything figured out. It's about trusting God even when things don't make sense. The hardest part was watching people around me cling to worldly solutions while ignoring the deeper spiritual battle. I wanted so badly to shake them awake, but Jesus reminded me that it's not my job to force change. It's only my job to share the truth and let him do the rest. If there's one thing I want everyone to understand from my experience, it is this: faith is the foundation for navigating these times, and it is never too late to choose Jesus. Experience has shown me that staying strong in faith is the most important thing we can do. The world will continue to change, and challenges will inevitably come, but our foundation must be built on Jesus alone. I have seen firsthand how easily fear can consume people. The media fills our minds with endless worries, economic instability, health crises, and political unrest. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, but Jesus taught me that fear is a weapon of the enemy. He wants us distracted, anxious, and disconnected from God's truth. I want to encourage you to turn away from fear and toward faith. Start by strengthening your relationship with Jesus every day. Read the Bible, spend time in prayer, and surround yourself with people who uplift your spirit. The closer you draw to God, the more peace you will experience, even in the midst of chaos. Jesus showed me that we are not alone in this journey. He is always with us, guiding and protecting us, even when we don't see it. The enemy wants you to believe you're weak, but in Christ, you are stronger than you realize. Stay vigilant, discerning, and hold on to hope. There will be times when you feel like giving up, but remember that God's plan is bigger than anything we can comprehend. The trials we face today are shaping us for eternity. Even in my darkest moments, when I felt like I couldn't go on, Jesus reminded me that He never leaves His children, and that truth is what keeps me moving forward. I urge you to do the same. Stay strong, stay faithful, and trust that God is working everything for your good. As I end my story, I want you to know that this experience has forever changed my life. I cannot go back to the way things were before, and honestly, I wouldn't want to. Jesus opened my eyes to a reality far greater than anything I could have imagined. The visions He showed me were not meant to instill fear, but to awaken hearts to the truth. Time is short, and the enemy is working harder than ever to deceive and control. But God is calling His people to rise up in faith and trust Him completely. I hope my experience serves as a reminder that we are in the midst of a great spiritual battle, and we must choose where we stand. If you're hearing this message, I believe it's for a reason. God wants you to know that He loves you and is calling you closer. You don't have to navigate these uncertain times alone. He is with you, guiding you every step of the way.